come and get wrecked by the best fuck silence.
The Blood God managed to do something that had yet to be seen from these entities. It created order. Its own sick and twisted order. But order nonetheless. What it did wasn't a forced occupation or conversion like in New York with the Spider God. People seemed to join of their own free will. More than that, they were drawn to its power, like a moth to a flame. Only in this context, I'd argue that the moth was far better off than those in the Red Cult. Blood holds absolute power over people. It accompanies violence, pain, and death. Some can't even handle the sight of it, while others are excited by it to a sexual degree. Some give it to save lives. It's tested to identify diseases and disorders, even holds the secrets of your ancestry. But more than that, your heart pumps it through every vein to every inch of your body, simply to keep you alive. The real power that blood holds is far greater than any of these ideas, ideals, or functions. It is an ancient and terrifying power. Where precisely this started is unknown, but it makes no difference at this point. We know that a remote tribe in Congo began the process that still spreads. A man in a cannibalistic tribe fell ill hours after a violent and bloody battle with a warring tribe. He was uninjured during the conflict and was previously in good health. The tribe's witch doctors proclaimed he was under the influence of the spirits and to be left alone. Ironically, just this once, they happened to be almost right. On the first day, the man lay on his hut floor, feverish and seeming to hallucinate. His screams and ramblings could be heard throughout the village. While a modern society would assume he'd become ill and needed medical attention, the superstitious tribe believed him to be communing with the spirits. However, they were not aware of the entities beginning to populate the earth that people referred to as gods, but they would be. On the second day, the ramblings from within the possessed man's hut became unrecognizable to the tribe. Whatever language he was speaking, no one had ever heard. It was low and harsh, the sounds causing physical pain to those who heard them. Nightmares plagued the village as the man would not or could not stop his otherworldly wails. By the third day, the poisonous words stopped spewing from the man's mouth, but his dark skin would begin to take on a disturbing red hue. For days he sat there, unmoving and unblinking. He was just staring off into space, not eating or drinking. On the seventh day of fasting, the man rose and left his hut. He walked to the center of the village, where all gathered around him. After hearing him speak in an alien language for days, they were all anxious to receive his message. What he brought to his village was far more and far worse than most could imagine. The man's bloodshot eyes matched his now dark red skin. He resembled a demon more closely than a man. His vacant stare seemed to peer through the mortal flesh of his tribesmen and left them feeling cold and empty as he took their measure. The man kept his silence, not uttering a single word after the god had finished speaking through him. But words were no longer needed. The seeds were already being planted, and the man was to sow what the god would reap. As he was, the vessel sought to give the god what was his, and did so willingly. Producing a crude stone knife, the man dropped to his knees, statuesque and resolute. He took the knife and pressed it into the underside of his forearm, just below the bicep, and carved it down to his wrist. The cut was so clean and precise that it only started bleeding once he had done the same to his other arm. Quiet murmurings and wide-eyed stares spread through the villagers as they feared the spirits were angry and demanded their deaths. Blood poured from the red man, somehow even a darker red than his skin. It snaked down his arms and burrowed into the hard earth below him as if it were alive. A quiet rumble grew into an earthquake. The ground shook and seized, moving and throwing all but the kneeling red man. Dark red tendrils of hard blood shot out of the earth and impaled the vessel through both his legs and shoulders, lifting him off the ground. The blood tendrils manipulated the man's limp body to raise his right arm above his head, hand cupped. Enveloping the bottom half of his body, the blood encased him in a stone-like cocoon, harder than steel. For what would be his last conscious movement, the red man tilted his head up to the sky and opened his mouth. Blood began to flow from his cupped palm and pour into his open mouth in an endless loop. And this was how he stayed the first vessel of ObaraRah. A hellish living statue, a deliverer. After seeing this happen, a reasonable assumption would be that the rest of the villagers would run for their lives in the horror of the unnatural perversion. But that more so describes the exact opposite of what they did. The tribesmen fell to their knees and began to worship the living statue from their new god. They took turns approaching the figure, and it reacted to each of them in different ways, measured them, judged them. The sixth person to approach the statue received the most profound reaction yet. Stairs made of flowing but substantial blood extended from the statue's base, beckoning her to climb. The tribe viewed this woman, who had been unable to bear children and failed several times, as a burden. Someone who did not contribute to the future. The thing about the future is that it's not absolute, and ObaraRah had very much so appreciated her sacrifices. Hesitantly, she climbed the 5 steps, coming face to face with the frozen red man, thick, warm blood flowing over and caressing her feet. Mechanically, the red man's head swiveled to meet her eyes at an even level. Flowing blood from the raised palm stopped for this moment. These were not the eyes of the man whose body this once was. An ancient and terrible consciousness flickered to life from inside them, transferring knowledge to the woman. In that instant, she knew more than any person could know. She understood. Her lips moved in to meet the red man's, and as they locked, time stood still. A river of hot blood flowed from the living statue's mouth down her throat, filling her in body and soul. As soon as the sacrament was complete, the stairs simply evaporated, dropping the woman's limp body to the ground. She was the next vessel, and those who'd already been judged took her to the red man's hut, where she would undergo her change for the next week. Ultimately, the process was similar for each of the vessels, though it varied slightly for the individual. 2 others were chosen that day, a man and a boy, both taken to the same hut after communion to undergo conversion. For the next week, the tribe waited around the statue. It gave no further response or movement, so they fasted, as did the vessels in their metamorphosis. On the 7th day, 3 red figures emerged from the hut, and each had changed completely, each far more than what they were. The villagers rejoiced in their salvation, the bloodkin their chosen leaders, their purpose divine. With a guttural bark that somehow conveyed instruction, the red boy demanded the villagers form 2 lines. The first line consisted of those who had submitted themselves to the will of ObaraRah without instruction. Consisting of 4 men, the second line was made up of those who'd refused to fast and had not worshipped the altar. Grabbing the first man in the second line, the red woman led him to the weak and starving villagers in the first line. Hearts thumping in fear, each of the other 3 men almost simultaneously had the thought to flee. But as soon as that thought had crossed their minds, the red man and boy were behind them, steely hands digging into their shoulders and painfully holding them in place. The red woman looked back at them with a warm smile, exposing her bone-white teeth. Sun was shining off her naked, dark red skin, the contrast so brilliant she appeared to glow. A demonic goddess whose body was chiseled to perfection. She told the men not to worry, that they had an important role to play in a voice so sultry that they were almost put at ease. Almost. With a flurry of her right hand, an ancient-looking obsidian dagger was in her grip, and in a split second, she had slit the first man's throat. A spray of crimson washed over the face of the first few kneeling villagers. They obeyed instruction and opened their mouths to consume the fresh blood with a nod from the red woman. Each weak and starving villager drank the men's blood until they were ordered out of the line, and each arose, revitalized and stronger than ever before. One by one, she cut the throats of the 4 men until every one of the loyal tribesmen had their fill. After which, the bodies were laid around the altar of the blood god for it to absorb. Having leadership, strength, and a purpose, the small Congolese tribe was no more. Here was the start of the Red Cult, as it would be called by those who would hear of its conquests. And conquer it would. The red man and boy would each take a group of 10 to different neighboring villagers. The purpose of these visits was closer to outreach than war, but the Red Cult would destroy the opposition with speed and strength far superior to any regular men when met with hostility. Even 50 warriors were no match for 10 cultists. That was without the help of the vessels. But something surprising happened. After seeing the godlike appearance of the vessels and the unbelievable strength of the cultists, people from other tribes would do just about anything for a chance to join. Word spread far and wide. Soon, tribal warriors would bring captives, family, and even their children to sacrifice at the altar of ObaraRah for the chance to be accepted. The statue would admit some, reject others, and sometimes even accept those who had been brought to be sacrificed, demanding they instead offer their would-be killer. How the god deemed the worthy is known only to it. But from the worthy, it sometimes chooses vessels that would take communion from the altar and undergo a transformation like the first of the red men. From these vessels, it would choose the most loyal and distinguished who had served dutifully and achieved much within the red cult to join the altar. Their red bodies would fuse with the altar that was the essence of ObaraRah. And with each fusion, the god's power would grow. After just 3 short months, the altar consisted of 50 red-skinned vessels, the bodies conjoining in a way that began to create the visage of ObaraRah himself. With enough power, the monument and the god inhabiting it started to move across the continent. The Blood God was not the first god to claim territory, nor to use or change people, but this was the first god to create a hierarchy, to incentivize people to join it. Not only that, but so far it has been successful. In the last report I heard, the Red Cult was over 5,000 strong, and the living altar of ObaraRah was nearly 100 feet tall and sailing across Africa on a self-contained sea of blood. It seems that those accepted into the Red Cult gain boons from the god. If an ordinary person were to consume the blood of another human, and plenty have tried, nothing happens. But when the vampires, as people have started calling them, or the accepted, consume human blood, they receive nearly superhuman strength and speed. Vessels have been witnessed turning immaterial, allowing bullets to pass right through their liquid blood bodies. Some say they can even tear the soul from a man's chest. And no, unfortunately, these fanatics do not have an aversion to sunlight, like the myths of actual vampires. At the rate the cult is growing, I believe they and ObaraRah possess one of the greatest threats at this time. Stopping their expansion should be priority number one of every able government and armed force. As we let that thing achieve power and add more vessels to its monolith, it gains greater and more terrible abilities. I've even seen pictures that show the Nile once again running red. This is only the beginning of the Red Cult's power. And while I don't know how the other gods are going to take to ObaraRah's attempt at domination, I do know that if that thing is left to conquer all of Africa, the rest of the world isn't far behind.
Yo, what's up, guys? Trying to get you some more stuff for the spooky season. How's it going? How y'all doing? We got some more gods coming your way. Want to give a shout out to AJ Flipmaster for the idea of this one is loosely based on a suggestion that he gave on the last video. What do you guys think? Do you have any ideas for, gods and other things? Maybe we could do spin-offs. We could follow, crazy spider people. Who knows? Let me know what you think. I'd like to see your ideas. And if we base something off of it, we'll talk about you. Like we're talking about my man, AJ, the Flipster, the master of flips. Back flip, front flip, doesn't even matter. Side flip, he can even do a barrel roll. Cause that's just how he rolls, man. It's just how he fucking does it, dude. Okay? That's cool, bro. That's fucking cool shit. Anyhow, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, share. It helps the channel. It helps everything pick up steam. Really just, it helps. So, if you got the time, do the crime. Not like actual crime, just like, subscribe, share, hit the bell. Alright guys, well, also, myself and Malice are working on putting together a Halloween-themed scary video, a compilation of stories from this place. It's like super fucked up and weird. It's gonna be cool, dude. We're working on it right now. We're both writing like as fast as we can, trying to get it together so we can put it together and put it out, We're doing it fast as we can. just stick with us. More stuff coming soon. Love ya.